Welcome to Vital Life Church in association with Vital Life Energy Formulas. Today's meeting, Who Can This Be? Your host, Jefferson, Campbell and Lorraine. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. We appreciate you all very dearly. Vital Life Energy Formulas in association with Vital Life Church does not treat, diagnose, cure, or profess a cure of any sort of disease. Thank you. Over to you, Jeff.
Thanks, Lorraine. In writing this poem, how I came up with this poem was I was remembering, because we're dealing with war right now, and when I was in the Marine Corps, going through the meteorological training in Southern California, I was laying down and I was looking up into the sky, and I saw in the sky peace. Peace was written in the sky. So that's how I came up with this poem. The title of this poem, Who Can This Be? Those who knew what was going on here, who can this be? What makes way to those who know little, who can this be? Less than little, little as nothing, who can this be? And less than little, little as nothing, who can this be? In the grass, which has it overgrown, has causes and effects. Who can this be? Someone must be stretched out with a blade of grass in his mouth. Who can this be? To see the clouds in the light of the sun. Who can this be? Peace. Thanks, Ray.
That's awesome. Thank you. All right, I just want to explain a bit more about nature's healing process, because a lot of us get confused with a healing crisis. Okay, nature's healing crisis and cycles. I wrote this a long time ago. I just got to find it. As nature is innately cyclical, all healing in our bodies also follows the natural rhythms of not only the earth, sun, moon, stars, but also of our own internal biorhythms. This is simply the body revisiting previous experienced dis-ease, not disease, dis-ease, in order to release it and bring the body back into equilibrium. All healing in our body starts from inside out and from the head down. When we go through a healing crisis, it can feel like we are going backwards and that we have some sort of disease, which we do not treat disease. We teach where the body's out of balance and creating dis-ease. But it can feel like a person has got some sort of disease. The distinction between one going through a healing crisis and disease is elimination. The elimination pathways will be open, whether that's coming out as an emotional, waking up in the middle of the night with a bad nightmare or a trauma being released, whether it's on the toilet, whether it's vomiting, whether it's all of a sudden, you've got something breaking out in your skin. The distinction between disease and a healing crisis is elimination. So what happens when we go through a healing crisis, the body is built up energy internally, has built up energy to eliminate its past troubles. As amino acids are regenerating the bone marrow, it's actually creating a new house. It's building a new foundation. So from the healing crisis, I want to read something that we teach you all that Lynn had written about, and that's balancing, because remember we're talking about dis-ease and balancing the 6-pointed star, the male energy, along with the female energy, the 5-point star. Because as nature's very cyclic, so is our internal biorhythms, to balance our 5-point and our 6-point star. Okay, so in her little booklet, which I've said, we will get this printed very soon, reprinted. She's written about the 5-point, 6-point star first. Hormone activation from the pituitary and light absorption down to the sacrum, the storehouse of vitality from conception. It is the individual's personal strength in going through the ups and downs of life. The cerebral spinal fluid conveys the finer essence and allows the cranial bones to move and breathe as it rises up and is not wasted. This brings concentration, peace, and well-being. Then she writes about, due to global warming, this was written, 15 years ago, our oxygen is very depleted in the air, in the earth, in our food, in our animals, and in ourselves. In order to find our own personal balance, we have to set boundaries. In a world that is constantly brainwashing with the idea that there is no boundaries, our personal boundaries must be our own to individually suit our journey through life. Light, heat, oxygen kills molds, viruses, fungus, and bad bacteria. Then she writes, amino acids plus water equals oxygen. Amino acids plus water equals light. Amino acids plus water equals heat. Light, heat, oxygen kills mold, fungus, viruses, and bad bacteria along with parasites. Soft tissue is the sensory and reflects the 5-point star. The front of the body, the calves, the palms of the hands, the face, the soles of the feet, the eyes taking all that they can see. The hard tissue is the motor and reflects the 6-pointed star. The back, the top of the feet, the back of the head, the back of the hands, and the shins. Walking and swinging the arms stimulates this motor reflex for greater mobility and grounding stability. The sacrum frees up, the eyes take in all the surrounding, and we feel happier and are more centered. Thank you. That's what I have.
Wow. Right, that's so beautiful what you're sharing, because it surely shows how much you've absorbed Lynn's energy and sharing and all the different appointments you have and the teaching that you have and sharing today. It just goes back 15 years ago when she wrote that, and your relationship between you and her and how much you've absorbed, and how much you're sharing that teaching. to everybody every day. What I wanted to share has to do with the uniqueness of what we do with our program and how we deal with the individual stress of that cortisol response that we go through. What we've discovered is that what Lynn was writing there and what Lorraine talks about and what we share about the amino acids is that the amino acids are the light and spark and energy of our body and our soul and our mind. And that in the actual cells, it's the DNA or activates our T cells or immune cells and stem cells, which is the regeneration. That's the reason we say this is a regeneration program, regenerative organ program. When we put together the individual formulations that we have and we put together, that Lorraine puts together for you individually, is those formulas are different parts of the body of those nutrients, the vitamins, minerals, and amino acids that the body needs in order to balance out that stress, that trauma, that injury, that emotion, that parasite, that virus. And when Lorraine actually looks into your eye and sees each fiber of the eye, which is mapping your spine and mapping the circulation moving in that part of the eye to that part of the body, and she's able to see a mapping of the actual cause of that stress at that moment or the healing that's occurring at that moment. Because the eye is an exact reflection of the spine and the light and the soul moving from the brain to the eye to absorption of light to the fibers moving from the top of the head all the way down to the sacrum. And each fiber is exact duplicate of this spine and the circulation of the fibers to the disc to that area. So you can pick up genetically weak areas, which mean the fiber is ballooned, and that's a genetic weakness. And genes are amino acids. So we can actually, through the healing that Lorraine was just suggesting, we can heal the fibers and heal that area, which is a gene, which is an amino acid deficiency, and always the outside stress will always go to our genetic weaknesses first. Because the program focuses on the stress at that time, the nutrients in the program, the way we put it together from morning, afternoon, night, or morning, mid-morning, mid-afternoon, and night, by taking those nutrients that are put together into an individual form, because each formulation is mixed into one drink. And you go, how can that work? Because you're mixing all these different formulas together and they're going into that one drink. And that formulation that's being put together is the formulation that's necessary for you as an individual to activate the healing from morning to night, to regeneration, we sleep, to wake up in the morning again. And the liver, and this is a part of our understanding, is the liver and the body is super intelligent with energy and light and vibration. And so that liver can take all those nutrients that are mixed together, that were different parts of the energy weaknesses that Lorraine picked up in the formulations, and put it together for you as an individual. And then the liver is able to recognize it and actually send the new cells to the areas that are stressed, and to activate the stem cells, the DNA, and the T cells to activate the regeneration, the healing. And when it gets stronger, the body expands. And that's the reason we say when a person starts a program to take the measurements when they start it, and a month later to take the measurements again from the top of the head to see if you've expanded and gotten taller. And so many cases we see that, because that's the regeneration of the cells of the vertebrae that's expanded, because the energy levels have increased to the level of gravity, to the compression in the spine, to the disc that activates the T cells and the stem cells, to the liver, to the regeneration liver, and activating the red blood cells that are now formulating and forming around the body, is carrying oxygen to get rid of that mold and fungus and chemical and viruses. So the part that is really really individual is that when, and then Lorraine like writes it all up, and sends it to you in the program, and it explains exactly what those different formulations and what's being done. And then by you following that for that month, or if it's a serious situation, in 2 weeks, or if it's a real serious situation, in a week, we'll then reassess the healing and the stresses that are occurring, because the body will activate the strength from inside out. And as it's regenerating new cells, the old cells will be eliminating. And that's the healing crisis as we heal from inside out. So when we think that each individual, one formulation is going to work or not work, or one herb is causing a reaction, or reacting to it, in actuality, what's happening is the actual formulations are working together and recognizing that incredible toxin. Now this regeneration of the stem cells and T cells are able to recognize it and start to eliminate it out, because you're now stronger from the inside. And that's the healing, or the healing crisis that Lorraine was just talking about. Anyway, that's what I wanted to share with people.
So what that means is there's a daily cycle, which is how Lynn was explaining about the 5-point star and the 6-point star. And I was explaining about the nature and the healing within nature, which is innately cyclical, okay, is nature. It's innately cyclical. Well, so are we, all right, in that we have a 24-hour cycle, which, remember, that deals with the 6-pointed star, which is the male energy. And with the 6-point star and the male energy, that's the spinal fluid. The cerebral spinal fluid pumps up the spine, and this male energy is within that spinal fluid. The vitality levels of your individual vitality is within that spinal fluid. And that spinal fluid, 80% of it in the male is the sperm production. So it moves up to the brain. Remember, that pituitary is stimulated by light. Remember, light, heat, oxygen. So that light from the cerebral spinal fluid moving from the amino acids, which are building the spinal fluid and stimulating the bone marrow, the stem cells, because the same fluid in the spine is the same activation of the stem cells within the bone marrow. So on a 24-hour cycle, that's the 6-pointed star, male energy. The circulation has to move up the spine to the brain, to the pituitary, down to the prostate to regulate the sperm production in the males daily. Their nature, which is cyclical, which is also ourselves, has the 28-day cycle, the lunar cycle. And that's everything that I teach all women, regardless whether there's an egg to bleed, there is that 28-day cycle. Regardless whether some women get their cycle on a 26-day cycle. Regardless where your assimilation, the first half of your cycle, to the ovulation, to the elimination. One cycle, 1 month, one ovary, and then we alternate back to the ovary, other cycle the next month. So that's the reason looking at your monthly cycle, no matter what your age is, looking at your monthly cycle is essential for your understanding of your healing and the healing crises that we talked about with nature and the innate cyclical energy that flows with nature, with the stars, with the moon, with the sun. Just like the 24-hour cycle every day in the male, which is the 6-pointed star. And now I'm talking about the 28-day cycle, the lunar cycle, being the 5-pointed star, the feminine energy. And what this is all explaining is the understanding of that very important vagus nerve from the 10th cranial nerve. And the vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the autonomic nervous system, but it also has two sides. It has a right and a left nerve. There's no accidents that nature and we were put together this way because we have a right outgoing male energy side and we have a receptive left side of the body, the female side. Just like we have the 6-pointed star in the male energy from the top of the pituitary all the way down to the sacrum, and we have the 5-point star in the female energy from the ovaries crossing over the breast tissue up to the thyroid at the top of the 5-point star. So everything is in cycles. If you pay attention to your own cycle, your individual cycle, whatever happens at the beginning of 1 month will come out at the end of the month. So being aware of that, but also it may not come out that cycle because you might have been exposed earlier, which is actually on the other alternate ovary cycle. So it's not just paying attention to the monthly, it's paying attention to the two, one cycle, one ovary, one cycle, the next, but also to the 3-month cycle, which is the liver regeneration, because the liver cells die as cells are being created. The regeneration and the healing through the amino acids that you're turning over more new cells than the cells that are dying off. So after 3 months from being on the amino acid program, your liver is completely rejuvenated where there's more new cells than the cells that have died off. Of course, we're going to go through a 6-month cycle. We're going to go through a 9-month cycle, like a pregnancy, and then we're going to go through a year cycle. So when we go through a trauma, at one time of the year, the seasons, because we've got the seasons coming in here as well from, spring, summer, winter, fall, winter. Okay, we've got the seasons that come into play. So we can go through trauma at one time of the year, and then a year later, we go through a healing crisis of that trauma that happened a year earlier. So it's understanding your individual cycle within the 6-pointed star of the daily cycle to the 28 lunar cycle within the feminine energy of the 5-point star. Males, pay attention to that also, because you have that too. Just like the vagus nerve has 2 nerves, a right and a left side nerve, and being the longest nerve within the autonomic nerve root is balancing that daily from the top of the back of the brainstem all the way down, feeding into every major organ. That vagus nerve goes to every major organ all the way down to your sacrum. So I just wanted to remind everybody on the, what we suggested about last time that we were on with the service, about the 5 things that I suggested, and I hope that helped everybody on the daily list to count our blessings, to practice kindness, let go of what we cannot control, listen to your heart, and be productive yet calm, and very important, breathe.
Lorraine, I was wanting to share about chemical. And one of the things I've been researching and learning about is how in the last 100 years that through the amount of chemical that we as human beings have been exposed to, how the hormone production in the male and female has dropped from about 50% from the amount of chemical. In other words, we had 50% more hormone in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and then we started utilizing the pharmaceutical medicine at that time through cortisone and through the birth control pill, which then suppressed the ovulation, because when you have that excess estrogen, then the ovulation is suppressed, and so therefore the pregnancy is reduced or stopped. And that chemical of that excess estrogen binding has lowered the amount of estrogen that we're now producing in relationship to progesterone in the female. So the female's progesterone has reduced dramatically from all the chemical exposure, because the chemical binds to the hormone production of the estrogen, and then we start losing, as a female, our natural progesterone. They're saying males have, one reason males become more feminine in the last 50 years is because they've had a higher level of testosterone, 50 years ago. And now the male energy of testosterone is reduced about 50%. So the strength of the individual male right now has reduced dramatically from the chemical exposure. And one of the things that we have always said is that the viruses attach to the chemical, and the chemical lowers the hormone production in the male and female by utilizing the nutrients, the amino acids, and activate the stem cells and T cells through the castral packs and through the nutrients and through formulas and through enemas and through foot baths and so on. We're able to remove that chemical, which then we start to build back up our natural hormone productions again. And we start to remove the chemical out of our body. As we remove the chemical out of the body, the spine, the vertebrae, the brain start to rehydrate itself and start to renew itself and start to remove that old chemical out. That can be both genetically passed on to us because our grandfather was a mechanic and that chemical was passed on genetically to the offspring, or our mother was exposed to a lot of chemical working, in a printing factory and so on. And there's different levels of the exposure to that. We live very close to a freeway. We get that chemical that way. We get chemical from going into a printing, where print's being done, and you work in a printing office, or film developing and so on. So there's many levels of chemical that we've been exposed to. And so therefore our hormone production actually starts to dry out from the chemical. What the program is able to do is to regenerate, activate the liver to regenerate itself, to remove that chemical out, because that's where the first stage of chemical is being removed, is through the bile production and the elimination of that chemical through the blood and lymph and sweat and urine and emotion. So that's the reason now we've gone to sister society today, where the mental capabilities and like that, and the stress levels of that we all are going through, and the insanity that we seem to be going through, so has a direct relationship to the exposure to the pharmaceutical medicines that we were using, along with the chemical that we breathe in, the chemical in our water, the chemical in our air, the exposure to that genetically from our past, our parents and grandparents. So you can see the most important part of this work in this program is to activate the body's ability to recognize the chemical, attach the chemical to the viruses, build up our immune system, activate our T cells, stem cells, our DNA in the cell, and activate a healing or regeneration. And this is exactly what we're doing, and to change the environmental toxicity and the distress that we're all going through on a daily basis. Thanks, Rain.
Okay, so what we'll do now is to do a minute of silence to draw all our energy and feel our internal vitality from what we shared today about the internal vitality that we all have, and feel our internal vitality. So we'll all just get relaxed, close your eyes, take a deep breath in, and just feel that deep breath that you've just inhaled, bring it all the way down to the sacrum, to where our vital energy and the reserve of our vital energy to rise up from the sacrum up to the heavens above.
Thank you, Rain.
Take that breath in again. Focus that breath to bring it all the way down to where the vital energy in the sacrum, the reserve and your vital energy, so it rises up to the heavens above. Focus that breath all the way down. On the exhalation, feel that vital energy moving through, bringing the energy up to the pituitary. We're sending peace to everyone and love around the world.
Absolutely. Peace to the world. We're praying for peace.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? So thank you everyone for being with us today. We appreciate you all. We're sending love, peace throughout the world. And we look forward to seeing you all again next week.
Thank you very much. And we love you all, and peace to the world, and pray for peace.
Absolutely.